Today we're doing another cost of living analysis today for Queretaro. I'm just going to apologize now that I'm going to butcher that the entire video. I'm going to kick off with doing an update on our forecasted cost of living, and then I'll quickly jump into our actual spend. Let's get into it. So there are only two updates to our most recent forecasted cost of living. And the reason for that is I actually completed purchasing or booking all of our accommodation. That came out to a little over $1,200 per month. So I've revised accommodation down from $1,350 to $1,250. And with that $100 reduction, we reallocated that to food and beverage. The reason being so we can eat out more. So our forecasted cost of living has not changed in total. So it's going to be $2,500 for the month for two, $1,250 for accommodation, $1,000 for food and alcohol, $250 for transportation, $0 for activities, and $50 for miscellaneous. So for our actual cost of living, we spent more than Puebla, but less than Mexico City. For the 4 weeks, we spent $1,815.27 for two of us. And again, that's for 28 days and nights or 4 weeks. If we extrapolated that to a full 30-day month, that would have been $1,944.93 for the month. That comes out to $972.47 per person per month, or $32.42 per person per day. So getting into categories, I'll kick off with our spend on accommodation. $1,017.59 for two for accommodation. Again, that's for 28 nights. Extrapolated for a full month, that would be $1,090.28 for a full month. So this was more expensive than our accommodation in Puebla by about 40%. It was also about 40% less than Mexico City, so kind of bang on the average of those two. And then the reason for this cost being a little higher was we opted to stay in a more modern Airbnb, a little bit outside of the Centro neighborhood. We wanted, there were cheaper options, but we wanted something a little more modern, and this one had a pool. Spoiler alert, the pool was a fiasco and we could barely use it, but there were cheaper options. So the next category, for food and alcohol in total, we spent a little under $700 for two. That came out to $12.47 per person per day. We definitely spent less on food here than in both Puebla and in Mexico City. We just didn't eat out as often. I had wanted to come to Queretaro because I've heard it was becoming like this massive digital nomad spot. So I expected food to be really inexpensive. That was not the case. There were some like kind of cheap taco or market options, but the bulk of the restaurants we went to were definitely more than they cost in Puebla. Or breaking down food and alcohol further, we spent $140.84 on groceries and eating in. So this was more than we spent in Puebla, which was a weird down month, but it was almost exactly the same amount we spent on groceries in Mexico City. The other part of our food and alcohol spend, besides groceries and eating in, was restaurants and eating out. It was the lowest restaurant and eating out spend we had had so far. We spent a little over $500 for the two of us. Again, we stayed in a lot, so we just didn't eat out that frequently. We also didn't eat at that many high-end or fancy restaurants. This was showcased in the fact that our most expensive meal the entire time in Queretaro was actually under $40. And when we did eat out, we didn't really have cocktails or, glasses of wine. The other thing I wanted to mention about our eating out spend in Queretaro, it was very similar to Mexico City in that our spend per meal breakdown was very similar. So 40% roughly for dinner, with brunch and lunch each coming in at 30%. Brunch, so we spent $152.73 for 10 brunches. Our cheapest brunch came in at $2.20. This was actually on two gorditas we had in Bernal. Our most expensive brunch came in at $24.56. For lunch, we spent $146.37 on 9 lunches. Our cheapest lunch was $2.95. This was for a gordita and 2 tacos. It was a different gordita than the cheapest brunch. And then our most expensive lunch was $33.55. This was at Cerveceria Hercules, really cool spot. And then for dinners, we spent $201.45 for 12 dinners. Our cheapest dinner was $3.55. This was, eating tacos at a taqueria. And our most expensive dinner was $39.59. All right, so bars, we spent $56.75 for both of us. This was the lowest bar spend during our time in Mexico. Again, I attribute this to just drinking tequila at home. We just didn't go to that many bars. And I think some of the like quote unquote bars we went to, if I got food, I might have counted that as restaurants. So that's another thing. Our alcohol spend, and this represents any time we had alcohol. So if we bought it, groceries, liquor store, if we went to a bar, if we got drinks at a restaurant. So our alcohol spend was $241.96 for two. This was also our lowest alcohol spend during our time in Mexico this year, about 20% lower than both Puebla and Mexico City. And then, same thing. Because we were drinking less alcohol at restaurants and bars and more at home, it just brought that cost down. Transportation for two during our time in Queretaro was a little under $72. So this was higher than Puebla because it cost quite a bit more to get to Queretaro from Puebla than it did to get from Mexico City to Puebla, because it's further bus. It's probably obvious. The second largest expense and why this was a little higher was we spent about $12 getting to Bernal for our day trip. And then rounding out this kind of category, we spent about $10 on 3 Ubers. And then just to give you an example of that long distance bus, it was about $50 for the two of us. It was like 3.5 to 4 hours from Puebla to Querétaro, whereas from Mexico City to Puebla was like 2 hours, and that was like $15 for the two of us. So Miscellaneous was almost bang on with Puebla. We spent $28.77. Again, this is mostly just kind of ad hoc or one-off trips to OXXO or a convenience store to either get water or beer. Nothing too fancy here. Well under the $50. Okay, activities. So the biggest change, for the first time ever, we had activity spend. So we spent a whopping $3 on activities. So it cost 30 pesos each to enter the hike the monolith in Bernal on our day trip. So the Peña de Bernal. Spent $3. Getting to Bernal was counted under transportation for the bus there. Otherwise, eating and drinking remained the major activities, and those were counted for under food and alcohol. It was interesting going over budget in a category, but I'm glad it was only $3. So where and how we reduced our cost of living in Querétaro. So similar story to everywhere else we've been. Groceries and Eating In saves money instead of eating out all the time. The other big thing is just walking a ton. We took 3 Ubers the whole time we were there, so a lot of walking. The big difference here was just not going out as frequently. So our food and alcohol, our eating out, all those alcohol bar, all those categories were down across the board. So that's the biggest difference in how we saved money here. Places we could further reduce spend. Our rent was quite up from Puebla. I said something like 40% up. So in Querétaro, anywhere in Mexico, the number one place we're going to be able to further reduce our spend is rent. So we've been doing everything on Airbnb just because it's convenient, but I've heard tons of people or several people who are spending as low as, $500, $300, or $100 a month on rent. And all of those are offline or off Airbnb. So if we want to look at coming back to Mexico or really bringing down our cost of living in the future, definitely not booking on Airbnb is probably the number one thing we'd need to do. So final thoughts. Here you can see the table of our forecasted, actual, and actual extrapolated expenses here. Like Puebla, I cleaned up these numbers so you're looking purely at Querétaro. This isn't like a monthly look. This is the 28 nights or 4 weeks we were there. A lot more straightforward because we're already in Mexico, so not needing to, figure out whether or not we account for flights. We're already here. We accounted for all the transportation. The last thing I would say about Queretaro is if we were able to find cheaper accommodation off of Airbnb, I do think this could be a front runner for the cheapest place. There were certain things that seemed more expensive than Puebla, but there were certain things that seemed cheaper. So if we could find cheaper rent through like a Facebook expat group or something else, I do think this could be one of the cheapest destinations in all of Mexico. All right, thanks so much for spending your time with me as I walk through our cost of living in Querétaro. Please let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions or advice on alternative places to look for accommodations outside of Airbnb. Until next time.